Picture this. A man in West Texas bows his head in a small church and prays to God. Halfway across the world in Istanbul, another man kneels on a prayer mat and prays to Allah. The news tells you these men are enemies, that they're dialing completely different numbers, that their worldviews are fundamentally, irreconcilably incompatible. But what if I told you that from a linguistic, historical, and theological perspective, they're actually speaking to the exact same reality, not a similar God, not a close enough God, the same God? Now, before you click away or fire off an angry comment, I'm not here to discuss geopolitics. I'm not here to erase theological distinctions or pretend everything is identical. We're here to look at the source code, the foundational data that most people never examine. The question we need to ask isn't who is right. The question is, are we looking at two different gods, or are we looking at the same divine architect through two different cultural lenses? To answer this, we have to strip away centuries of political friction, crusades, colonialism, and cable news narratives. We have to go back to the manuscripts, to the original languages, to the textual evidence. And when we do, we find a startling continuity. We find that the monotheism professed by Abraham, Moses, and Jesus isn't replaced in the Quran. It's echoed, affirmed, and reinforced. So put aside what you think you know about the clash of civilizations. We're going to look at 5 dimensions of evidence, starting with the most basic and working our way to the most profound. Because before we can understand the Arabic Allah, we need to understand the Aramaic Alaha. And that connection, it's going to fundamentally shift your paradigm. Let's begin. Let's start with the most obvious barrier, the name. For many Westerners, the word Allah sounds foreign, exotic, maybe even threatening. It feels like a proper name, specific to Islam, distinct from the God of Christianity. But this is a linguistic illusion. And to shatter it, we need to remember one simple historical fact that gets lost in translation. Jesus of Nazareth did not speak English. He didn't speak Greek in his daily life. He spoke Aramaic, a Semitic language closely related to Hebrew and Arabic. If you were standing in 1st century Judea, listening to Jesus preach in the hills of Galilee, you wouldn't hear him say God. You would hear him use the Aramaic word for the divine. And we actually have proof of this preserved in the New Testament itself. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 15, verse 34, we get a raw, untranslated fragment of Jesus' actual words. When he cries out from the cross in his moment of deepest anguish, the text records, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me? That word, Eloi, comes from the Aramaic root El or Elah. In the Syriac dialect of Aramaic, which was widely spoken across the Middle East, the word becomes Alaha. This isn't a name like Zeus or Thor. It's a title. It means the mighty one or the deity. It's the standard Semitic term for the creator. Now, let's trace this linguistic family tree to the Arabic side. The word Allah is not a new invention that appeared in the 7th century. It's a contraction of the Arabic phrase Al-Ilah, which translates directly to the God, with the definite article al emphasizing uniqueness and singularity. Allah is the etymological cousin, the direct linguistic sibling of the Aramaic Alaha that Jesus used. Here's where this gets really important. If you were to walk into a Christian church in Cairo, Damascus, or Baghdad today and open an Arabic Bible to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the very first word you would see for God is Allah. Fi al-Badi kalaka Allah as samawat wa al-ard. In the beginning, Allah created the heavens and the earth. Millions of Arab Christians, descendants of some of the oldest Christian communities on earth, pray to Allah every single Sunday. They've been doing it for nearly 2,000 years. This linguistic continuity isn't a coincidence. It's evidence that we're dealing with a shared vocabulary that predates both Christianity and Islam as we know them today. The software is the same. Only the interface, the language and cultural expression, is different. Before English, before Latin, before the artificial divisions of the modern world, these faiths grew from the same Semitic soil, speaking variations of the same ancient language about the same ultimate reality. But sharing a name is one thing. Sharing a nature, sharing the same understanding of who or what God is, that's another question entirely. So let's go deeper. Let's talk about the actual character and nature of the being these two men are praying to. We often make a critical mistake when thinking about God. We project human limitations onto the divine. We imagine a superpowered human being, someone who gets angry like we do, changes his mind, makes mistakes, or sits on a throne somewhere in the clouds checking his watch and reacting to our prayers in real time. But both the Bible and the Quran actually demand that we shatter that image. They present something far more absolute, far more transcendent than an oversized human. Let's start with the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 4, we encounter the Shema, the central thesis, the non-negotiable foundation of Jewish and Christian monotheism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. In Hebrew, that last word is Echad. It doesn't just mean one in the sense of a number. It implies a compound unity, a oneness that is complete, total, indivisible, and singular. It's the bedrock declaration that distinguishes Abrahamic monotheism from the polytheism that dominated the ancient world. Now, let's look at the Islamic parallel. In the Quran, Surah Al-Ikhlas, chapter 112, a chapter considered so theologically important that the Prophet Muhammad said it equals 1/3 of the Quran, states with crystal clarity, "Say, He is Allah who is one, Allah the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent." The Arabic word used here is Ahad. Linguistically, it's a cognate of the Hebrew Echad. It describes an absolute unity, a oneness that cannot be divided, split, multiplied, or compared to anything in creation. Here's why this matters profoundly. Both scriptures are telling us that we're not dealing with a deity who exists within the timeline, reacting to events as they unfold. We're dealing with the architect of time itself. If God is one, in this absolute, transcendent sense, He exists outside of the dimension of time. He's not waiting for the prayer in West Texas or later receiving the prayer in Istanbul. To the architect, both prayers are received in the same eternal moment. Past, present, and future are simultaneous from his perspective. This has massive implications. It means that when the man in Texas prays to God and the man in Istanbul prays to Allah, they're not directing their prayers to different telephone numbers. They're directing them to the same timeless, eternal source, just using different languages and cultural frameworks to do so. Think about it. A French person calls water eau, a Spanish person calls it agua, an Arabic person calls it ma. But they're all describing H2O. The chemical reality doesn't change based on the linguistic label. Here's a historical fact that might surprise you. This concept of a singular source behind all reality isn't just theology. It's surprisingly aligned with modern physics and the scientific quest for a theory of everything. Sir Isaac Newton, the father of modern science, was obsessed with this idea. Most people don't know that Newton wrote more about theology and biblical interpretation than he did about physics. He filled millions of words analyzing scripture. Why? Because Newton believed that the laws of gravity, motion, and mathematics were simply the source code of a single, unified lawgiver. He saw the oneness of God as the necessary prerequisite for the oneness of natural law. If the universe operated under chaotic, competing gods, like Zeus fighting Poseidon, you couldn't have consistent physical laws. The fact that F equals ma works the same way in Texas and in Turkey points to a singular underlying order. Whether you're looking at the singularity of the Big Bang or the monotheism of the prophets, the data points in the same direction, a single origin point. But if the origin is the same and the nature is the same, what about the instructions? Does this same God want the same ethical behavior from us? That brings us to the most practical and potentially controversial dimension: ethics. If the source code is the same and the architect is the same, then the operating instructions for human beings should theoretically align, right? Well, in the West, we have cultural shorthand for the core ethical principle of Christianity. We call it the Golden Rule. We teach it to kindergartners. Treat others the way you want to be treated. But when you read the actual text, you realize this isn't just a nursery rhyme about being nice. It's a radical, counterintuitive command designed to disrupt human selfishness at its root. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 12, Jesus synthesizes the entire ethical framework of the Torah, all the law and the prophets, into one sentence. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Notice the phrasing carefully. He doesn't say, don't hurt people. That's passive. He says, do to them what you want done to you. It's proactive. It requires you to actively simulate another person's experience and act accordingly. If you want respect, give respect. If you want mercy, show mercy. If you want someone to help you when you're struggling, then you better help others when they're struggling. It's an algorithm of empathy. Now, let's look at how the Quran handles this same principle. In Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 135, the Quran takes this empathy algorithm and applies it to the courtroom, to the administration of justice. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever, with what you do, acquainted. Read that again. Even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. This is the golden rule pushed to its most uncomfortable extreme. It's saying, you have to treat the truth as sacred, even when telling the truth damages your own interests, your own family, your own tribe. In a courtroom, if your son is guilty, you don't lie to protect him. You tell the truth. Why? Because justice, fairness, is a reflection of God's nature, and protecting your team at the expense of truth is a form of idolatry. Here's the synthesis. We live in an era of intense tribalism and polarization. We're constantly told to protect our side at all costs, our political party, our nation, our religious group. But both the Bible and the Quran are telling us to do the exact opposite. Whether it's the proactive empathy of the gospel or the absolute justice demanded by the Quran, the instruction is the same. You cannot claim to love the Creator if you're systematically cheating, dehumanizing, or lying about His creation. The source code of human morality is corrupted by tribalism and restored by radical fairness and empathy. So now we have the same linguistic root, the same transcendent nature, the same ethical foundation. But there's one final dimension we need to examine, the one that usually terrifies us most. What happens when the source code shuts down? What happens when the screen goes black and we die? Because if these two faiths agree on where we come from and how we should live, you might be shocked by how similarly they describe where we're going. Let's talk about the destination, about what happens after death. In secular materialist culture, death is often seen as a fade to black. The screen turns off, consciousness ceases, and that's it. No credits roll. You just stop. But both Christianity and Islam reject this nihilism with absolute force. They insist that human life has weight, that every action we take is being recorded in a moral ledger that will one day be audited. Nothing is lost. Nothing is forgotten. In the book of Revelation, chapter 20, verse 12, the Christian apocalyptic text describes a scene of ultimate transparency and accountability. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done as recorded in the books. The imagery here is almost bureaucratic, forensic. It suggests that every action, every kindness, every cruelty, every lie, every moment of courage has been documented. It's all data that has been stored and will be reviewed. Now, let's look at the Islamic parallel. In the Quran, Surah Al-Zalzala, chapter 99, verses 7 and 8, this accountability is described with stunning precision. So whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it. Think about the granularity of that statement. An atom's weight. In the 7th century, the concept of an atom wasn't scientifically understood the way it is today. But the Quran uses the smallest conceivable unit of matter as a metaphor for moral precision. It's saying, even the smallest act of kindness you did in secret, the smallest gesture of mercy when no one was watching, it counts. It's registered. And conversely, the small cruelties you thought didn't matter, they matter too. Here's the psychological and existential function of this doctrine. Whether you call it the judgment seat of Christ or the day of recompense, Yom al-Qiyamah, the underlying message is identical. Justice is not just a human invention that dies when civilizations collapse or when courtrooms close. Justice is woven into the fabric of reality itself. What you do in the dark, what you do when no cameras are rolling, when no one is watching, actually matters. It gives ultimate significance to the moral choices of the individual. It means your life isn't just random chemistry. It means your choices have eternal weight. Both traditions are saying, live as if you will one day have to give an account for how you treated others, because you will. So let's bring this all together. We've examined 5 dimensions of continuity. The linguistic root Jesus spoke Aramaic and used Eloi/Alaha. Arabic-speaking Christians use Allah. It's the same Semitic word. The transcendent nature, both traditions describe God as Echad/Ahad, an absolute, indivisible oneness that exists outside of time. The ethical foundation, both demand the golden rule of empathy and radical fairness, even when it costs you personally. The accountability, both describe a final reckoning where every action, down to an atom's weight, will be brought to light. So here's the question that's probably burning in your mind. If there's this much continuity, why is there so much conflict? Why does the history of Christianity and Islam look less like a family reunion and more like a 1,400-year-long battlefield? That's a fair question, and the answer is complex. It involves politics, empires, colonialism, resource competition, and human tribalism. But I want to offer a different framework for thinking about this. We often imagine religions as separate stone fortresses, each protecting their own territory, claiming exclusive truth. But I prefer the metaphor of the prism. Imagine the divine reality as a beam of pure, absolute white light. It's too vast, too intense, too infinite for the limited human mind to comprehend directly. So that light passes through the prism of human existence. It hits the prism of history, geography, language, culture, and human experience. And just like in physics, when white light passes through a prism, it refracts. It separates into different colors. On one side of the prism, the light bends and takes on the hues of the West, Europe, the Americas, Christianity as shaped by Greco-Roman civilization. On the other side, it refracts and takes on the hues of the East, the Semitic and Arab worlds, Islam as shaped by the deserts of Arabia and the markets of Baghdad. If you stand inside one color, you'll argue forever about which shade is correct. You'll fight over the hue. You'll say, my blue is the only truth and your red is heresy. But if you're willing to trace the refraction back, if you're willing to look past the cultural packaging, past the historical baggage, past the political noise, and back to the source of the beam, you might discover it's all the same light. Here's my challenge to you. This isn't about erasing distinctions. Christianity and Islam have real theological differences, and those matter. But it is about recognizing a shared foundation that's far deeper than most people realize. It's about seeing that the man in West Texas and the man in Istanbul might be calling the same number, just in different languages. If you want to keep exploring the source code of what we believe, if you want to dig into these texts with intellectual honesty and see where they converge and where they diverge, then subscribe and turn on notifications. We're building a community of people who value curiosity over certainty, bridge building over wall building? Drop a comment. Did this shift your perspective at all? Or do you think I'm completely off base? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts, especially if you disagree. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking. I will see you in the next one.